Hi, everybody. This week we are on week 6. This is our final week, and it's a really interesting week, and I hope you find it very interesting as well. This is about criminal investigations and forensics, and who are forensics, and what do they do? What is a profiler, and do you really see profilers in any departments? We see profilers in the FBI, but in regular police departments, normal police departments, whether it be state, local, or sheriffs, you typically don't because there's an awful lot of work that goes into becoming that, and it's a very specialized unit. I can tell you that those units are always accessible. I mean, I've worked with profilers, but they've come from the FBI. The FBI are the profilers. I have no recollection of any department that I know of that has a profiler working for them. But when we look at these, we need to look and see who they are. First of all, why do we have criminal investigations, and why do we have forensic people? When we look at the principles of a crime scene investigation, we need to look at Lockhart's theory. Now, Lockhart's theory goes way back. That's LOCARD S principle holds that the perpetrator of a crime will bring something into the crime scene and leave with something from it, and that both can be used as forensic evidence. But you know who else brings stuff into a crime scene? Police and people who want to know something, the FOMOs, fear of missing out. So you have major scenes and all of a sudden you have your police commissioner showing up, or you see your police chief showing up. And the reality is, when you're taught at how to do crime scene investigations, the number one thing is to keep people out of the crime scene. Make sure that nobody goes into your crime scene. And there are different parts of that crime scene that will be done by different people. There's people that do guns, there's people that do blood, there's people that do, fingerprinting, blood spatter. There's many different people that will be in there for different things, and they're the experts. So you need to stay out of the way, let them do their thing, because they're going to be there recording and taking notes. A crime scene can go for days, can go even longer, because everything is done methodically. Everything is done very slowly. Everything's written down. Everything's documented. Everything's photographed. Any evidence that's found is photographed before it's moved or touched. Every single time you touch a piece of evidence, you must then change your gloves again and go to the next piece. So there's a lot to it that's very important. But remember that not only do people leave behind evidence, so do police. And that's why it's very important that police officers are trained on what is expected in a criminal investigation. There are many different types of forensic sciences, and one of the things that you need to look at is what who are they? What do they do? Some of them will be your 10 most common would be your fingerprint technicians, your evidence technicians, your forensic science technicians, your specialists, your managers, people who are in charge of everybody, who overlook the whole scene, because there's always someone in charge of a scene. There's always a lead investigator, always. And that lead investigator is in charge of making sure that everybody does it right and make sure that everything is collected correctly and that people who are just nosy and not supposed to be there are not there. Need to know basis is really important. Forensic accountant. This is a really big field, and it's used for a lot of your financial crime. It's used for all your financial crimes. It is probably the hardest job that is out there. And to have that job, you have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in finance. You'll see a lot of this will be with the FBI, but you'll also see forensic accountants that are hired by private agencies to go through their accounts to see if somebody has stolen from them. You'll see a lot of it turn civil process. A structural engineer to see what the what was it functioning properly or not functioning. And then you have forensic psychologists. We will see this sometimes in our cases that involve victims who they'll become witnesses in court to define what they've seen. Forensic pathologists would be your MEs, and many, they're medical school as well, and they have residency. And a sad misconception for a lot of cases is that there is a cause of death. Very often there is not a cause of death, and people don't know what the cause of death is. So I will be sending all of these to you so you know. On how to become a profiler, Several programs can prepare for your career, but if you're going into profiling, you need to be backing yourself up with forensic science, psychology, and other related fields. And keep in mind that you're going to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree with very good grades to get into this program. It's a really hard program to get into. We're going to go into what is a criminal profiler. I think that because it's used so little, and you can look at it, it's a question that's in here. But what is a criminal profiler? A criminal profiler is a part of an investigative team, and then he or she, also known as an analysis, will compile and compare the data, and then tell you what they feel or who they feel, where you can find some information, or they might even be able to tell you how to approach an interview. So very often how you approach an interview really can change how an interview comes out. And you learn this also in interview school on how to do that, which brings me to my next one that most people don't even know even exist, and that would be your forensic interviewer. Forensic interviewing is someone I ran across weekly. Your child sexual assault units use forensic interviewers. They use them for dealing with children. They use them for dealing with people who have some limitations. They work with making sure that it is a good interview and an accurate interview. I taught interview services. I interview kids all the time, but I can tell you straight out, I could get a kid to tell me anything I wanted just on the way that I did an interview. And it was important to note that, because if you want your interview to be good and accurate, then you need to know what questions to ask, and you never ask closed-ended questions. So we use forensic interviewers all the time for child sexual assault, and that's the lay of the land. And that goes back to the McMartin case, which is a really, really good case to look at. And I think I'm going to give this to you. It's the abuse case. It's what changed all of child abuse cases in the United States, as it should have. You had one woman who did all of the interviews, and it was found to be tainted, and these people were found to be guilty. Parents were encouraged to send their children to this for 2-hour interviews with McFarland, and she pressed 400 kids to a series of leading questions and offered rewards. Clearly, this was a faulty investigation, a very faulty investigation. And it changed, it changed how we interview kids, and it changed how we have multiple people that we'll interview. But they're forensic interviewers for the most part now, or someone that's been highly trained. And it is a very great profession out there. And it is something that you will find that there are jobs out there for that in all of your child abuse units. The next thing I want to talk about was the CSI effect. The CSI effect has been defined as unreasonable expectations for the part of jurors. The second definition, which one's contrary, refers to the way that CSI rates the stature of scientific evidence to virtual infallibility. Science is not always perfect, and that's what really makes it important to know. Science is not always perfect. I'm going to talk about the CSI effect, and I'm going to give this to you. So the CSI effect, here's the problem that we have with the CSI effect. The CSI effect has many, many things that go against it. One is it becomes more difficult to prosecute defense because everybody wants to have that one thing, that one nail that will prove the case, the DNA that will make it unmistakable. But reality is we don't always get that. So you need to know that we don't always get that. There's some high profile cases out there, the Casey Anthony and the Robert Blakes, where they were acquitted because of it. So we need to know that. It also becomes harder to find jurors because what happens is they get to do questioning of the jurors before the jurors are sat. And if you have a prosecutor or even a defense attorney that is looking to see how much they believe in the CSI effect, you will find that they will be based off. They'll ask them what TV programs they watch, and then they'll be bounced off that jury because of that. Resources. Do you know how expensive it is to have DNA done on, you only have it done on your major cases, or to have it done on many cases, for any type of case, or any type of forensic evidence, it's very expensive. So it's very hard, and it's really hitting at the resources for anybody in the law enforcement. It's also about when you look at crime scenes on TV, they are not reality. It takes crime you see them on TV and then you see them in real life, and they're not the same. But jurors expect to see that. There's some useless tests that are on. NCIS has the most useless tests out there that aren't real tests, but everybody expects that you can solve a crime in 1 hour. Well, not even 1 hour because it's like 15 minutes after the commercials, but that's not reality. So when you have crime scenes that don't have the ability to do these tests that are made up, then it becomes an issue. Then you find out defense attorneys, they're working to, they have to explain. So I used to have to do this when I would go to the grand jury. I would have to explain certain injuries that might not show. For an example, if there was a rectal penetration, you might not have evidence the next day because the rectum heals very quickly. And I would have to explain that. I'd have to have a doctor come in and explain it because people expected if somebody had been rectally penetrated, there's going to be major ripping. Well, that's not actually accurate. So you would have to have, they have to educate the juries on what there is and what there isn't. And that requires some people to be brought in as experts. Again, very expensive. Then there's as the jurors become more knowledgeable that there is things out there, there's nothing that can be done on a statement. They want irrevocable, they want to have something hard and tangible they can put their hands on. So they want to know what kind of evidence there is and why wasn't there more evidence. Well, sometimes you're collecting evidence in the middle of a rainstorm and it becomes bad. Sometimes you're in the middle of doing a crime scene that has, dangerous situation to taking at that time. So for getting evidence, it's not always a perfect scene that you see on TV. Sometimes it's pretty smelly. Sometimes it's always pretty dirty, and you're almost always crawling or going somewhere. So, and also the CSI effect made more people want to go into it. A lot of things have changed having to do with police. CSI, still people like that. I'm going to send you this so you have this. Our next thing that we're going to go to is your final paper. I want to go a little bit on first you need to know what crime mapping is. And I tried opening the link that was sent to you. I couldn't find it. I've asked them to send you it again. But if they don't, this is what crime mapping is. And I'm going to send this to you so you have it. What exactly it is and how it works and the effects of it. And on your question it's a 6 to 8 page in length. Remember that. It's a minimum of 6 sources. 6, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have to have APA format. And what we're going to do is, what prospects do Weisberg and McEwen envision with crime mapping? I'm going to give you their paper, but the thing that they had given you is not on there at this moment. What advantages and disadvantages do you envision with sharing crime mapping with the community? Well, there are some good and there's some bad. Crime mapping has become an important component in crime prevention because it can help the identification of crime problems and the evaluation of crime prevention initiatives. One of the areas you can look at is the SORI board, the Sex Offender Registry. The Sex Offender Registry is under Megan's Law. That is a feel-good law. It doesn't stop people from sex offending, but people say, "Well, I know where Johnny lives, so you know what? I'm going to be like, I feel really safe." But it shouldn't make you feel safe. You should feel that for every one person that's on that SORI board, there's someone that's not on there that should be. So I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of that. Data becomes available to everyone. So what happens if you can now be considered living in a bad neighborhood? And very much like the broken window theory, if you live in a bad area, does it continue to be a bad area? Data is widely open and criminals also have access to it. If an area is perceived to be bad, is it bad? So the other big problem with mapping is who's doing the mapping, who's doing the defining. If you have a police department that doesn't want an area to be thought of as being bad, are they going to redefine it and put the mapping in as something different than what it is? We had that last week on one of the papers we did. If you have car thefts, a lot of car thefts in your area, what happens to your insurance? It goes way up. What happens to people moving into community? Are they going to move into a crime-ridden area? So sometimes you'll see, and I hope not, but it's been shown that it's happened where you'll see some data has been changed to fit whatever bill.